This storm started when Seattle
$9 and charge a roughly $5 monthly
Testing,
fee.
testing.
For more
Testing.
now, we turn
Oh.
to Michael Barbaro of the New York Times.
Testing.
And Michael, welcome.
Thanks for
See
having me,
Home
Marty.
Depot,
Let's
they
start
sold
out
something.
with who this is
Their,
aimed at. Walmart
supply
is
thing.
aimed
Huh?
at
Good
the
memory.
unbanked and
That's right.
underserved.
What was it?
How big a customer base
The
is
stock went
there, and who are they?
On Grand.
Okay, we're going.
All right.
So,
Oh, you're gonna do this, oh, you're not standing behind the camera, okay.
no.
Okay, we're having a conversation.
She said, we're just talking.
Just sit on the bed.
We're just talking.
Felt so fast. So she borrowed it, and then I gave
Missy?
her support because of that.
We're just talking. If that's okay, I mean, if we're not interrupting.
Oh, excuse me.
Okay,
Please forgive
I'm gonna open this because I'm a little warm.
Yeah, you look a little flushed.
Tell David Frosty.
Yeah. Okay, so we're talking about, let's go way back. So do you remember your grandparents?
I remember my grandfather.
And his
My
name?
father's father is Cornelius.
Cornelius.
He was the fire captain.
So you remember your father's father, right?
My father's father.
Right, and he was captain of the Brooklyn Fire Department?
Captain in the fire department.
And what was he like?
He was an authoritative, sort of an authority figure. We didn't wrestle with him or anything like that. He was
Right.
not that kind of a guy.
Yeah.
He loved to take us to the firehouse, let us slide down the poles,
Really?
Oh, yes.
I never heard that.
and then and we'd fool around with the typewriter, and occasionally he had a Model A, or not a Model A, but a black four-door sedan Ford, and he took myself and my brother Tom, and I think our cousins Tommy Miles, and maybe one other cousin, to big fires in downtown Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And he'd show the badge, and they'd let us through the fire line,
No kidding.
and we'd go in and see the fire.
Well, you know, it's funny that you're talking about that because I remember in Long Island, we'd be somewhere and there'd be a fire engine that would go by and you'd start chasing it.
I know.
Yes,
Really?
you would. I mean, and now I don't mean all the time, but there were a number of times where you said, let's go see where they're going. Yeah.
We did. Well, you were young, you and Rick were young. We'd take you down to the firehouse and let you sit on the fire engine,
Yeah, that I remember.
and you got a
Yeah.
kick out of that.
But you don't remember chasing any fires?
I don't really remember. I may have, not literally chasing, but we might go follow him. But
Yeah.
he was a great guy. We had a four apartment house in Brooklyn where I grew up. And he and my aunt, his daughter, my father's sister, who house kept for him. And we'd go in there at night occasionally. He'd be sitting in a big chair with a cigar, and we'd light the cigar for him. He'd let us strike the matches on with it. And that was the extent of my contact with him.
Really?
And then maybe I was 7 or 8 years old, and he got sick, and they carried him down the stairs in an ambulance to the hospital. And he died, and they had a fireman's funeral, a fire captain's funeral with
Yeah.
everything else. But
Were you living in the same house?
we were living in the same building.
Is that the same building that Grams was in when we would go pick up Grams in Brooklyn when we were kids?
Yes.
It's same building?
No,
No.
no, no. She, after my father died in 1947, I guess, I was still in the Army, and Tom was at Holy Cross. When I came back and got out, we spent the summer in Long Beach, and we came back, and then I started going back to college because I had finished a year before I went in the Army, and I finished the last 3 years at Fordham. And I commuted by subway because I didn't want to leave my mother alone. She was by herself with my daughter, my sister Jean, Virginia.
Virginia.
And she finally got, we owned the house. We had 3 tenants at that point in time. And there was too much work involved. We
Yeah.
putting out the trash and the garbage and putting up storm windows. And so she finally decided to sell it. And then she moved to another apartment. She and my father's sister, Molly, Aunt Molly, and her husband, Uncle Miley, who was the former jockey. They bought a two-family house up in the 70s in Brooklyn. And my mother lived on the ground floor with my sister, Virginia and Barbara. And the Mileys lived on the second floor. And I commuted there to, most of the time, to Fordham. And then later on, she, I think, Aunt Molly wanted to move to Long Island to be with her daughter, who was married and had children. And my mother moved to another apartment on 5th Avenue, 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. And she lived there for a number of years. And in the meantime, I had left Fordham, and after a short job at an advertising agency,
You worked for an ad agency?
for a short period, about a year.
Did you want to be in
I did.
You did?
Well,
You never told me.
I had an interest in advertising. They had the Advertising Association of America, 4As they called it. Whoops.
Yeah.
And they had aptitude tests that they used to offer, and I took some of those when I was in college, and I ended up with a high score. And I thought, well, it's a very creative business.
Yeah.
I kind of thought I was creative, and I thought I was verbal enough, and that would be interesting.
I never thought of you as
Yeah.
creative.
I've always thought I was, and not as creative as you, from what you've shown me lately. But I was in this job. It was a beginning job, and I was at that point engaged to your mother, and who I'd met down in Long Beach and Atlantic Beach. And so I was eager to get a more remuneration and a little more specific career,
Yeah.
rather than work your way up.
Yeah. But that's interesting. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yes,
All we're talking about tonight is your childhood.
my childhood.
And
Okay.
so, how about your grandmother on your father's side? Do
Never
you
met.
remember?
Never
Never
met.
met her.
Never met.
Had she been dead for?
I don't know how long.
And what was her name? Do you remember?
Don't remember that either.
Do you remember her maiden name?
Flanagan. My mother's maiden name is Flanagan.
Flanagan. Right.
But I don't know what my grandmother's maiden name was. The one who would know is Jean, who did the.
Right.
Our daughter, your sister Jean, who did the study,
Right.
the
genealogy.
genealogy study.
Right.
Yeah.
So, from what I remember hearing is that being a captain in the Brooklyn Fire Department at that time was a pretty big deal. I mean, for an Irish guy, that was about as high as you could expect to rise, right? Is that fair to say?
I don't know if that's true.
And we're talking about in their late 20s, early 30s.
Well, I was born in 27, so this must have been in the early 30s.
Yeah.
You know, you knew that we lived in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
When I went to kindergarten and started first grade down there.
Right. And where in D.C. did you live?
We lived in 2 different houses we rented. It was near Chevy Chase.
Chevy Chase. Right.
Blessed Sacrament was
Right.
as I recall, that was the name of the parish
Right.
and the school.
Well, you remember, so Chevy Chase is actually Maryland, right? And so you were near the border between
Near the
DC?
border of Maryland, yes.
Okay.
Right,
All right.
right.
And you remember the street or
I don't.
no?
I don't.
And how much time were you down there? Do you remember how many years, or how old were you when you left?
Well,
After Hoover
we
left?
left probably at 32 when Roosevelt got elected,
Right.
because he promptly fired my father and replaced him with a better organized, better related Democrat.
Sure, sure.
And we moved back to New York.
But I'm sorry to interrupt, but was your dad a Democrat?
Yes, I think he was a Democrat,
Yeah.
but as far as I know, he was never active in.
Right. He wasn't well connected.
No. He was an attorney, and he had background in the Admiralty law. Admiralty law.
So why do I get this about insurance business? So insurance business, Admiralty law, and an attorney, all three? I mean.
Yes, well, they're connected. You're an attorney, and then you get into specialties,
Right.
and he got into the Admiralty side of the house.
And then where did the insurance thing come?
I don't know. Well,
No? He didn't have an insurance business?
well, yes, he was.
I mean, I remember, you remember going up to Navesink and you telling us about how he was called Mr. Sunshine by his employees, and he had an insurance business.
He was president of the Admiralty Insurance Company. It was a division of the Fire Insurance Company of Philadelphia. He was headquartered in New York City, and that was again his Admiralty background again. He was active during World War II, insuring boats, and I can remember him getting presents from clients, ties, and a bottle of French champagne once, and
Really?
I don't know why I don't know the circumstances over what he was insuring, whether it was cargo or the ship itself. But during World War II, obviously, they must have lost a lot of ships, and I don't know.
Sure. Did he ever come home kicking the dog because the ship went down there?
No, he never did.
Yeah.
No, he never did.
He was, great disposition, huh?
Very, very easygoing.
Yeah.
Very
Easygoing.
calm, easygoing. Yes.
Sort of like a Billy type, or a Terrence, or.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
So I have two questions. I want to hear about the Depression, and I mean, so you went through the Depression firsthand, right? I mean, things really didn't start getting better till 38, 39, 40, right?
Yes.
They didn't get, just because Roosevelt got elected in 32, things didn't get better overnight.
They certainly didn't.
So, any personal recollections of the Depression? I mean, remember bread lines or Grams telling you to eat everything on your plate or anything like that?
Not many. We were sheltered, and I was oblivious. I remember at our grammar school, St. Patrick's in Brooklyn, that you'd come down the stairs to go home for lunch. We'd be about 2 or 3 blocks from home, and they'd be cooking in the basement, and they would usually sound like they're cooking hamburgers. They used to smell so good. I was wishing that I could be eating a hamburger there instead of going home. And I used to go home for lunch, and my mother would have once in a while a lamb chop, baked potato, things like that. And it didn't really strike me that this was sort of a charity supplement. We had, and then I used to come back from lunch, and the nuns would occasionally, they'd have a piece of bread with strawberry jam, and they would choose lots to who gets the strawberry jam and the bread. And I never got it. I could never understand what
they were giving it to the poor kids.
They were giving it to the poor kids.
Yeah.
And we had one poor boy in our house, in our class, and he always looked so dirty. His hair was so wild. Every so often, they'd take him out, and the nuns would, and wash his hair. That's the only thing I remember. And
Really?
so, now we were very much sheltered because my father had a pretty good job, and we lived in a not a good middle class neighborhood in Brooklyn,
Yeah. And he was always working. He was never out
and
of
he was
work.
always working. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about pets.
Pets.
That was a little depressing. Let's talk about pets. Ever have any when
Never.
you were a kid?
Well, I shouldn't say that.
Probably weren't many pets around because people were eating them back
We
then.
had one in Washington. We got some friends across the street, puppy, had puppies, and we prevailed upon my parents to let us adopt it. And my father was kind of a stiff neck about some things, and I don't think he was too crazy about getting a dog and having to feed it and take care of it, because obviously Tom may not have been 7 or 8 years old,
Yeah.
so no one was going to do it, any work but my father and my mother. But we got this puppy, and I don't remember too much about it, but I can remember one day we were outside the house, and there's a car coming down this little hill,
No.
and the car had wobbly wheels. I can remember that to this day. And the kids were on both sides of the street, and we were calling this puppy, and the puppy got hit by the car,
And you watched it.
and we watched it.
Do you remember the puppy's name?
No, I don't.
Did-
We took it into the house, and my father, as I recall, didn't want to take it to the vet
Yeah.
because of the expense involved with the puppy. But we finally prevailed upon him, or my mother did. And he came home from the vet maybe a couple of days later. We put him in the basement and went down the next morning, and he was dead. And I can remember accusing my father of having killed the puppy, one way or the other.
Yeah.
And of course, my father didn't pay any attention to that.
No.
That's our only experience
Ouch.
with pets.
Jeez.
Sorry you asked.
I can understand why that was your only experience with pets.
That was my only experience.
Okay, now, and we've got to talk about, well, okay, so let's talk about your brothers and sisters. Let's talk about Tom and Ginny
And later Barbara.
and Barbara, right?
Barbara.
So, 3 kids.
Yes,
3 kids. And who came? Tom was the oldest?
Yes.
Then you,
yes,
then Ginny, and then Barbara.
yes.
And you and Tom always seem to have been pretty close, right? No?
Not really.
You're number 2.
Yeah, I'm
Like
number
you're like
2.
me, you're number 2.
Yeah. He was always, as the oldest might be, more responsible,
Yeah.
good student.
Kind of nerdy like Ricky.
You gotta delete that one. A little nerdy, I guess. I don't know. Very serious. He used to work in a candy store to help out, and I don't know how much money he made. It wasn't much, but he might have been in high school this time, maybe by then. I don't know.
I can't see him sticking any candy in his pocket or.
No. But he was able to buy a box of O. Henry's, probably for $1, at those times. He'd take it home. He never seemed to give any away. And then he bought the Hardy Boys series.
The whole series.
You remember? Well, one at a time.
All right.
And I think he let me read them after he was finished. But we weren't that close. But we went every summer. We went down to Long Beach. We had a bungalow down there,
Yeah.
and we were probably closer there. We played ball together with friends.
Yeah.
Went to the beach together with my mother and sister, and went from there. And then because Barbara Ginny was the younger of the three of us, first three. And she was a little heavy,
Yeah.
and
Is Jenny's gone now?
she's still alive. Oh yes. And my mother, I can remember her mother taking her to the doctor to get a diet,
Yeah.
and they didn't seem to get along that well. Maybe because,
Sure.
and,
Both
but she
women.
was fairly close to my father, and she and I got along okay. We'd squabble once in a while, but we weren't close.
Yeah.
And she was a good enough student. I think she did okay in school, but we weren't all that close.
Yeah. Who married George? Who married George?
Barbara
The
is
telephone guy.
He's my fourth child in the family.
Right. Or
And I guess he was sort of one of the, what do you call them, a mistake. She must have been, she must have been at least 8 years younger than me.
yeah.
Maybe as much as 10, I'm not sure. And she was much more lively, cute, blonde, not fat. Had a lot more fun.
Blonde. I always think
She's
of.
blonde.
Was Ginny had the red hair?
Jenny had red hair.
Yeah. Right.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Because I remember that. I remember her. I remember it being at Graham's in Brooklyn at her townhouse. Not at the shore.
Yeah.
And she played rough. I mean, she was rough with us.
Was she?
Yeah, she liked, you know, she was playing with us, but I just remember she was hard. I mean, she just seemed to smack us around a little bit.
Is that right?
Yeah, but so that's Ginny.
Yes.
But Barbara, I don't have any sense for what
No.
Barbara looked like or what, I mean, so let's just say Barbara in her 20s. What actress, any actress, who would she look like? I mean, she looked like, and same with Ginny. Who did they look like? Any actress alive today?
No, I don't.
No?
Can't think of that. Jenny had nice hair and pretty face, just always just too heavy.
Yeah,
And it had tremendous effect on her personality,
Sure.
I think.
sure.
Barbara, on the other hand, was much more outgoing, lively, not much of a student. Went to a parochial high school, took a commercial course, and of course, you know, I'm in the Army during some of this time. I'm
Yeah.
in college,
Yeah.
so I wasn't
You weren't around.
around that much. Tom and I were both not around that much.
All right.
More in the summer, the beach would be down there.
So tell us, how about a story when you were kids, when you were just kids, before you went off to college? I mean, besides the puppy story, there's got to be, you know, some story where you guys, as a family, your parents, you know, some fun thing happened. Any good stories that you can think of? You know, Uncle Tom came home with a cut lip, or I don't know. Any maybe you had a, you know, someone chasing, I don't know.
Oh, you know, there were a lot of everyday things in life. You know, we used to have Sunday afternoon after church. We'd have as was our habit, most Sunday afternoon, we'd have a full-fledged dinner. We'd either go drive out in my father's car in Brooklyn